Welcome to this course on Principles of Macroeconomics. Before I begin, I want to talk a bit about my biography. My name is Elvis Cornerstone. I am a Ghanaian citizen. I am the Dean and the Professor of Economics and Finance at the Accra Business School, Ghana. I have a PhD degree in economics, and that is the option of banking and finance from Bangor University in the United Kingdom. I have 13 years of university teaching and research experience, mainly in economics, banking, and finance. I have taught and managed research programs in universities that include countries such as United Kingdom, Ghana, and Afghanistan. My research interests are in the areas of development economics, industrial organization, efficiency of emerging banking systems, and development finance, including access to finance by SMEs in African countries. My current research papers under review with refereed journals include Review of Development Finance, European Journal of Finance, and Journal of Banking and Finance. I have policy and development research papers to my credits as part of consultancy projects undertaken for the Development Research Department of the African Development Bank in Tunisia. Prior to joining academia, I worked in project financing as a credit manager within the private sector in Ghana. What is the structure of this course? This course is divided into 6 lessons of 45 minutes, shown in 3 sections of 15 minutes each. Each session is followed by questions and answer session. Each session of questions and answers would constitute 15 minutes over a 45-minute sequence. The course is accompanied by texts and audio and video materials and the course guide in the study pack. By successfully completing this course, you would learn how to apply acquired economic analysis tools in the fields of business. And what are the key aspects of this course? In this course, you will learn first about the meaning of economics and what economists do, taking into account the different economic systems and the nature of economic reasoning. We will then delve into demand and supply analysis. The reason why governments intervene in the market would also be looked at. We shall also talk about the costs and revenue of firms. Market structures would be the focus of the final aspect of the course, introducing us to the concepts of competition, monopoly, and oligopoly. What are the skills at the end of this course that we expect students to gain? Students who complete this course will master the following: understand and be familiar with basic theories and concepts in economics, derive market demand and supply functions, and demonstrate their understanding of how markets clear through the interaction of supply and demand. And number 3, show how firms respond to changing demand and costs. Also, students will have to show the consequences of government intervention in the form of price controls and indirect taxes. And finally, we expect students to be able to think and write critically with the opportunity to apply theories and techniques learned to current economic issues and problems. What is the knowledge at the end of this lesson? Students who complete this lesson will learn about the following. Number 1, the problem of scarcity and how it is managed. 2, illustrating economic issues through the production possibility curve and the circular flow of income. Number 3, classify different economic systems and assessing their strengths and weaknesses. And finally, distinguishing between economics as a science and also as a social science. This is lesson 1, section 1. Introducing economics is the topic for this session. So why do we have to study economics? And more importantly, what do economists study? Before we begin with what economists study, let me ask you this simple question. What is economics? Economics is basically the study of the production and consumption of goods and services and their management. Examples of goods include physical products such as oranges, mangoes, cars, etc. Services also include items such as banking services, insurance, education, and etc. Economics involves the production of goods and services because it shows how much the economy produces, how much each firm or person produces, what techniques of production are used, and how many people are employed. Economics also involves the consumption of goods and services because it shows how much the population as a whole spends and how much it saves, what the pattern of consumption is in the economy, how much people buy of a particular item, and what particular individuals choose to buy. People who study economics are called economists. Now, before we continue, it is also very important to talk about the pioneers and the famous economists that the world has ever developed. And whatever may be the situation, I believe strongly that a quite number of us already know some of these famous economists. So let's look at a quite number of them. We will not be able to exhaust all the list, but we just want to look at a few. Some of the pioneers and famous economists that the world has ever produced include Adam Smith, who was actually a Scottish, and he was born in the year 1720 and he died 1793. He was a very famous economics professor and economist, let me put it that way. The next in line is Jeremy Bentham, who was also a British. He was born in the year 1748 and died in the year 1832. Then we have David Ricardo, who was also a British from 1772 to 1823. Karl Marx, who was a German, was also one of the famous pioneers of economics, who was born in the year 1818 and also died in the year 1883. Ronald Cross, who was a British, 1910 to the year 2013. And we also have Irving Fisher, who was an American and was born in the year 1867 and died in the year 1947. And the list can continue on and on and on. But I want to end here, and now we move on to the subjects of what we want to treat today. Economics itself is divided up into various subjects. And we have the microeconomics and the macroeconomics. So having defined what economics means and its famous pioneers, let us now look at how the subject is divided. Economics is traditionally divided into two main branches, which are microeconomics and macroeconomics, which I just mentioned. Whereas microeconomics concerns the individual components of the economy, such as households, firms, and the government, macroeconomics, on the other hand, concerns the economy as a whole. Put differently, microeconomics is the study of economics at an individual, group, or company level. It focuses on issues that affect individuals and firms. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, is the study of a national economy as a whole, to put it that way. It focuses on aggregate variables or issues such as employment, inflation, income, and output on a national scale. Now let's begin with the problem of scarcity, which is one of the main areas we want to treat today. The central economic problem faced by our society is a problem of scarcity. If people are asked if they would like more money, the majority would say yes. The question is, why would people like more money? The answer is simple. They would want more money in order to buy more goods and services. The point is that human wants are virtually unlimited, yet the means of fulfilling those human wants are limited. This is so because society has got only limited amount of resources. These resources, or factors of production, as they are often called, are of threefold, namely labor, which is human resources. Secondly, land and raw materials, that is the natural resources. And finally, capital, which is basically made up of manufactured resources. In brief, scarcity can be defined as the excess of human wants over what can actually be produced. Given that people, firms, and the government want more than is available, makes them behave in a certain way, and economists study that behavior. Let's now turn our attention to microeconomics and choice. Because resources are scarce or limited, choices need to be made in our decisions. These types of choices can be categorized into three. Firstly, what goods and services are to be produced and in what quantities, since resources are not enough to produce all the things people want. For example, how many bicycles, how much rice, how many televisions, etc. are to be produced. Secondly, how are things to be produced? For instance, will bicycles or cars be produced by robots or by human beings? Thirdly, for whom are things to be produced? The ability to buy an item depends on the ability of individuals' income. In other words, how will the nation's income be distributed to allow the individual components of the economy demand for the items produced? Now let's look at the concept of choice and opportunity cost. Choice involves sacrifice. The more an item one chooses to buy, the less money is made available to purchase other goods. For instance, less money will be left to spend on other goods if one decides to spend more on clothing. In the same direction, a country that chooses to produce more clothing with its current resources will have fewer resources to produce other goods. This means that the production or consumption of one thing involves the sacrifice of alternatives. The sacrifice of alternatives in the production or consumption of a good is known as its opportunity cost. Now, let's look at the illustration of economic issues, which is basically the production possibility curve. Now, we are to talk about another subject topic, and that is what I just mentioned, the production possibility curve. What is the production possibility curve? The production possibility curve shows all the combinations of two goods that a country can produce within a specified time period with all its resources fully and efficiently employed. Before looking at the graph of a production possibility curve, let's first explain the data of a production possibility curve. Assuming that we are in a country that devotes all its resources, that is land, labor, and capital, to producing just two goods, which is food and clothing. Various possible combinations that could be produced over a given period of time, example a year, are shown in the table as you can clearly see on the screen. Thus, the country, by devoting all its resources to producing food, could produce 8 million units of food but no clothing. Alternatively, by producing say 7 million units of food, it could release enough resources, which is land, labor, and capital, to produce 2.2 million units of clothing. At the other extreme, it could produce 7 million units of clothing with no resources at all being used to produce food. Now let's explain the graph of the production possibility curve as shown clearly on the screen. The information in the table can be transferred to a graph. We measure units of food on one axis, in this case the vertical axis, and units of clothing on the other, that is the horizontal axis. Now, the curve shows all the combinations of the two goods that can be produced with all the nation's resources fully and efficiently employed. For example, production could take place at point X, and that is on the curve, with 6 million units of food and 4 million units of clothing being produced. If the country chooses to produce more clothing at point Y, as you can clearly see on the screen, that is on the curve, With 6 million units of clothing, it would have to sacrifice the production of some food. The sacrifice of food is the opportunity cost of the extra clothing. Production cannot take place beyond the curve. For example, production is not possible at point W. This is so because the nation does not have enough resources to do this. Sometimes the resources of a nation may not be employed fully. They may also not be used in the most efficient way possible. In other words, the nation may be producing at a point inside the curve. For example, point V. In that case, the economy is producing less of both goods than it is possible for it to produce. This is so because some resources are not being used. For example, workers may be unemployed, or because the nation is not using the most efficient methods of production possible, or a combination of the two. By using its resources to the full, however, the nation could move out on to the curve to point X or Y, for example. It could thus produce more clothing and more food. Over time, the production possibilities of a nation are likely to increase. Investment in new plant and machinery will cause an increase in the stock of capital. New raw materials may be discovered. Technological advances may take place. Labor is likely to become more productive. This growth in potential output is illustrated by an outward shift in the production possibility curve, as you can see clearly on the screen. This will then allow natural outputs to increase. For example, from point X to point Z on the graph. To end this session of the lesson, let's talk about the circular flow of goods and income, which shows the relationships between firms and households in a money economy. The process of satisfying human wants involves producers and consumers. The relationship between them is two-sided and can be represented in a flow diagram, as you can clearly see on the screen once again. The consumers of goods and services are labeled households. The producers of goods and services are labeled firms. Firms and households are in a twin demand and supply relationship with each other. Let's now look at the relationship between the firms and the households of the circular flow in more detail. Looking at the diagram carefully, households demand goods and services, whereas firms supply these goods and services. There is an exchange that takes place in the process. This means that money flows from households to firms in the form of consumer expenditure, while goods and services flow from firms to households. The coming together of buyers and sellers is known as market. Firms and households come together in the market for factors of production. Firms demand the use of factors of production owned by households, that is labor, land, and capital, whereas households supply these factors of production to the firms. In exchange, firms pay households money in the form of wages, rent, dividends, and interest. In the end, there is a circular flow of goods, services, and income. Households earn income from firms, and firms also earn income from households. In the same vein, but in opposite direction, households supply factor services to firms, which then use them to supply goods and services to households. This then brings us to the end of lesson 1, session 1. Please stay with me. I'll be with you again in a short while. Thank you.